From the blink of an eye to, the beat of a heart, the fundamental engine of life is movement.
It absolutely is.
You use it to form the words you're hearing right now, and even the simplest single-celled organisms, they have these subtle shifts just to survive.
And that underlying motion, that's universal across all of biology. But when we start talking about the mechanics of how complex life like us operates, we really need to draw a crucial distinction, a distinction between simple movement and something a bit more focused, locomotion.
I think this is a key nugget for you, the listener, right at the start. So what's the difference?
Well, movement is broad. It's, any significant feature of a living being. Think about the churning of your stomach or just the twitch of a finger.
Right.
But locomotion, that's much more narrowly defined. It's the voluntary movements that result in, and this is the important part, a change of place or location.
So walking, running, swimming.
Exactly. Those are deliberate actions that achieve a displacement.
So, okay, if your involuntary muscles are just transporting food through your gut, that's movement.
Right.
But when you decide to get up and walk to the refrigerator, that's locomotion. So the rule is all locomotions are movements, but not all movements are locomotions.
You've got it. And the purpose behind that locomotion is, well, it's incredibly primal. It's always tied to survival.
How so?
Whether you're talking about an ancient fish or a modern human, the need to move is usually driven by a search for food or shelter, finding a mate, or, most critically, escaping danger.
Escaping predators.
Escaping predators.
Yeah.
It all comes down to coordinating the muscular, skeletal, and neural systems to achieve those goals.
And our mission today is to take a deep dive into the complex engineering required to turn a thought like, I need to move, into physical action, starting right where it all begins, at the cell.
And we might think of big muscles when we think of human movement, but there are actually three main types of movement that our cells exhibit internally. They all handle very distinct tasks.
Okay, let's start with the one that sounds the most ancient, amoeboid movement. Tell us about the cellular special forces that use this.
Amoeboid movement, it's named right after the amoeba. It's primarily seen in specialized immune cells in our bodies, like macrophages and leukocytes in the blood.
So they're like your cellular infantry.
Exactly. They move by forming these temporary extensions called pseudopodia, which literally means false feet.
And what's powering those false feet?
It's generated by the streaming of the internal cell fluid, the protoplasm, but it's anchored by the cell's internal scaffolding. Specifically, cytoskeletal elements we call microfilaments.
So they're literally crawling through tissue to hunt down pathogens.
That's exactly what they're doing.
So that's the defense mechanism. Then we have ciliary movement. And this is less about moving the cell itself and more about, moving other things across a surface.
That's right. Cilia are these tiny hair-like projections. They line the internal walls of many of our tubular organs,
Creating a ciliated epithelium.
Right. And their movements are just perfectly coordinated, like a tiny wave of oars on a ship. In your trachea, for instance, this coordinated beat helps sweep dust and foreign stuff out of your airways.
Keeping it from reaching your lungs. Vital.
Very vital. And cilia are also crucial in the reproductive system. Their movement facilitates the precise passage of the ovum through the female reproductive tract.
Without that, fertilization just wouldn't happen.
It would be impossible.
Okay, and that finally brings us to the main event. Muscular movement. This is the movement of our jaws, our tongues, and of course our limbs.
And this is the only type that truly relies on that specialized contractile property of muscles to, physically interact with the external world.
And muscle tissue itself is a marvel.
It is. It's a specialized tissue that comes from the mesoderm, the middle layer of embryonic cells. And get this, it accounts for 40 to 50% of an adult human's body weight.
Wow. And it has these 4 essential properties, right?
4 key engineering properties. Its ability to react to a signal, which is excitability, to shorten contractility, to stretch extensibility, and to snap back elasticity.
And those 4 properties, they let us classify muscles into 3 distinct types. It's usually based on location, what they look like, and whether we control them.
Starting with the ones we all think of, the skeletal muscles. They're the ones most closely associated with the skeleton. There are levers and ropes.
And under a microscope, they look striped, striated.
They are striated, yes. And critically, their activities are under our voluntary control. So they are the voluntary muscles, the ones responsible for locomotion.
So skeletal muscles are the primary drivers of that willful action we defined as locomotion
Yeah.
right at the start of our deep dive.
Exactly. Then you have the visceral muscles. I like to call them the internal transporters.
Okay.
They're in the inner walls of your hollow organs, your alimentary canal, your blood vessels. And they look smooth. They don't have that striated pattern.
And these are entirely involuntary. You can't just, tell your intestine to contract faster.
You cannot. They just assist in transporting material, whether it's food or gametes, all happening completely below our consciousness.
Which brings us to number 3, the cardiac muscles. The heart's endurance engine. It seems like a bit of a hybrid.
It's a unique structural compromise for sure. Appearance-wise, it's striated, just like skeletal muscle, but functionally, it's completely involuntary, like visceral muscle.
It has that branching pattern.
A unique branching network. It ensures the electrical signal spreads efficiently, maintaining that critical rhythmic beat for your entire life without you ever having to think about it.
This is where it gets really interesting. The molecular engineering behind it all. We have these different muscle types, but at the core, how does any muscle fiber actually shorten and generate force?
We're zooming in.
We are zooming in to the functional unit of contraction, the sarcomere, which is governed by the sliding filament theory.
Okay, before we get to the sliding, we need to understand the structure. A skeletal muscle, it's built like a thick cable. You have muscle bundles or fascicles wrapped together.
And inside those bundles are the muscle fibers, the cells.
The cells themselves, yes. And those cells are wrapped in a membrane, the sarcolemma, and their internal fluid, the sarcoplasm, is just packed with these things called myofibrils.
But the most important part of that fluid is the sarcoplasmic reticulum.
Yes, that reticulum. It's the muscle cell's specialized storage network. It's the reservoir for the entire process, holding on to massive amounts of calcium ions.
Now, when you look at the myofibrils, you see that striped pattern, the striations, the dark A bands and the light I bands. Where does the sarcomere fit in?
The sarcomere is the microscopic workhorse. It's defined as the segment of the myofibril that exists between two successive Z-lines.
Which are these dense, elastic fibers that anchor the system.
Exactly, and that sarcomere is the functional unit of contraction. Inside it, you have the two main players, the thin filaments, mostly a protein called actin, and the thick filaments, which are myosin.
And the sliding filament theory tells us that contraction happens not because the filaments themselves shrink, but because the thin actin filaments slide inward over the stationary thick myosin filaments.
It's like pulling a rope past a fixed point. The rope moves, the point doesn't.
So how do you start that pulling process? This is where the nervous system sends its orders.
It all starts with a signal from the central nervous system. It travels down a motor neuron and releases a neurotransmitter, acetylcholine, right where the nerve meets the muscle.
The neuromuscular junction.
Right, and this generates an action potential, an electrical signal, that just zips across the sarcolemma.
And that signal is the trigger for the sarcoplasmic reticulum to release all those calcium ions it's been storing.
A massive flood of calcium ions.
So if acetylcholine sends the signal, what's the actual molecular key that allows actin and myosin to finally meet? Is it ATP or the calcium?
It's the calcium. The calcium acts as the physical key. You see, in a resting state, the actin filaments have binding sites for myosin, but those sites are covered up.
They're masked by a protein complex, troponin.
Exactly. The system is locked down. So that flood of calcium is essential because the calcium ions bind to troponin.
And that binding changes its shape.
It causes a conformational change that physically moves the masking proteins out of the way, exposing the active sites on the actin.
And now the myosin head, which is an active enzyme ready to burn fuel, is finally free to connect.
It forms what we call a cross bridge. And once that connection is made, the myosin head uses energy from breaking down ATP to execute the power stroke.
That's the pull.
That's the pulling mechanism. The myosin head snaps or ratchets, pulling the attached actin filaments inward toward the center of the sarcomere. The Z-lines get pulled closer together and the whole muscle shortens. That's contraction.
And it's important to remember for you, the listener, the I bands, the light areas, they get reduced. But the A bands, the dark areas, they retain their length. The filaments slid, they didn't shrink. When does the muscle relax?
The cycle stops when the signal stops. The calcium ions are actively pumped back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. As the K++ level drops, troponin moves back, remasking the actin sites.
The cross bridges break, and it's over.
It's over. The muscle fibers stretch back to their resting length.
And that same molecular machinery, that also determines how long a muscle can work before it gets tired, right? It divides our fibers based on how they produce that ATP fuel.
Right. We classify them based on myoglobin, an oxygen-storing pigment. Red fibers have a lot of myoglobin, which gives them their reddish color. They have lots of mitochondria, and they rely on aerobic ATP production.
Meaning they use oxygen efficiently. And why should you care about that?
Because aerobic respiration is highly efficient. It's sustainable. Red fibers are built for endurance. They're the slow twitch fibers that marathon runners rely on.
And on the other hand, you have the white fibers.
Much lower myoglobin, so they're paler. They have fewer mitochondria, but they have a ton of sarcoplasmic reticulum. They depend on fast anaerobic processes for energy.
Explosive, powerful, but not for long.
Not for long at all. It quickly leads to lactic acid buildup, which causes fatigue. These are your fast-twitch fibers for sprinters or weightlifters. Sudden bursts of power.
Okay, so if the sliding filament theory is the engine, we need a structure to support it, a chassis and a set of levers to actually use that force. So enter the skeletal system, our body's 206-bone framework.
It's the framework that provides shape and protection. And the basic difference between its components is the matrix. Bone is hard because of calcium salts. Cartilage is pliable, flexible, because of chondroitin salts.
And we divide it into the axial skeleton, the core, and the appendicular skeleton, the limbs.
The axial core has 80 bones. That includes the skull, which is an amazing piece of engineering made of 22 bones, 8 cranial, 14 facial.
Plus the tiny ear ossicles malleus, incus, and stapes, and that single, really unique U-shaped hyoid bone in your neck.
Below that, the vertebral column, the central support. It's 26 vertebrae, and what's fascinating is the consistency. Almost all mammals, from a mouse to a giraffe, have 7 cervical vertebrae in the neck.
That's amazing.
It is. Then we have 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, and the fused sacral and coccygeal sections at the bottom.
And protecting our vital organs in the chest, the 12 pairs of ribs, it's a complex cage. The first 7 pairs are true ribs.
Because they connect directly to the sternum, yes. The next 3 pairs, 8 through 10, are false ribs. They join up with the 7th rib.
And the last 2 pairs, the 11th and 12th, are the floating ribs. They don't connect at the front at all.
Right, they protect the kidneys from the back. Now moving to the appendicular skeleton, this is our locomotion system. 30 bones in each limb.
So in the arm, we go from the humerus down to the radius and ulna, then the wrist bones, the carpals, the metacarpals of the palm, and the phalanges of the fingers.
And in the leg, the powerhouse is the femur, the body's longest and strongest bone. It connects down to the tibia and fibula, the patella or kneecap, and then the tarsals, metatarsals, and phalanges of the foot.
The power and leverage from that femur is just crucial for standing and running.
It is. And these limbs attach to the body via girdles. The pectoral girdle connects the arm using the clavicle and scapula to form the shoulder socket. The pelvic girdle forms the acetabulum, the deep socket for the head of the femur.
And all of that movement relies on the joints, which act as fulcrums. We have 3 main types.
We do. We have fibrous joints, like the sutures in your skull. They don't move at all. They provide stability. Then cartilaginous joints, like between vertebrae, which allow for limited but essential movement.
But the real stars of locomotion are the synovial joints. They're what allow for considerable movement because they have a fluid-filled cavity.
You see them everywhere. The ball and socket joint in your shoulder gives you the widest range of motion. The hinge joint in your knee allows movement on one plane. The pivot joint in your neck lets you rotate your head.
They're the mechanical marvels that translate that molecular contraction into actual physical displacement.
And when this whole complex, coordinated system of levers, engines, and commands fails, we see some specific disorders that often target one of the mechanisms we've just explored.
For example,
For instance, myasthenia gravis is an autoimmune disorder that attacks the neuromuscular junction, the very point where the nerve signal tries to cross into the muscle.
so the communication link is broken.
It's broken. It causes progressive weakness and fatigue. And connecting directly back to that chemical engine we talked about, tetany.
Okay?
This is characterized by rapid, violent muscle spasms, often triggered by extremely low calcium levels in the body. It shows you exactly what happens when that crucial calcium key isn't regulated properly.
And in the skeletal system.
We have things like osteoporosis, an age-related disorder where decreased bone mass makes fractures common. It really highlights the vulnerability of that hard calcium matrix, especially with age.
So we've traveled from the definition of movement all the way to the architecture of the human chassis, and we've dived deep into the microscopic engines that power every single step you take.
We have. We now understand that core difference between simple movement and life-sustaining locomotion and the highly specific roles of the three muscle types.
And most importantly, we broke down the stunning molecular engineering of the sarcomere and that sliding filament theory, how a single electrical impulse kicks off a precise dance between actin, myosin, and the critical regulator, calcium.
It's an incredible system.
So what does this all mean for you? Next time you use locomotion, whether you're running a marathon using your red fibers or just getting up to greet someone, consider this remarkable fact. The ultimate evolutionary imperative for survival, that primal need to change your place in the world, is directly translated into that movement through a single calcium ion binding to a protein at the molecular level. It makes every step you take a miracle of biochemical coordination.